She was showing off her new dress to her boss at his celebration, until she noticed me at the door. Looking back, the first real crack didn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It came with a bank notification. It was just past 4 p.m. On a Friday when I saw it, a charge for $28.74 from a wine bar about a block from the historic hotel downtown. The kind of place with rustic oak tables and tiny glasses that cost too much but feel just sophisticated enough for an early evening. Sophie and I had passed it a few times but never gone in. Too curated, she said. Too artificial. She preferred cozy pubs with live jazz and dim corners. At least she used to. The timestamp on the charge was what got me. 3:41 p.m. She had told me she was still at the hair salon, then maybe swinging by a printer to pick up last-minute programs for the company gala that night. Said she'd meet me at the hotel venue a bit before 6. I didn't question it. I had no reason to. Not until that little banking ping made me pause. I didn't spiral, not immediately. Instead, I told myself maybe she had stopped in to grab a quick drink alone, a rare indulgence after a long week. Or maybe she was meeting a coworker for a quick pre-event run-through. Harmless. Reasonable. Still, something didn't sit right. Then, as if the universe had decided to screw with me just a little more, a photo briefly appeared in our shared cloud album. It wasn't staged or intentional, just a flash of an elevator mirror selfie, one of those accidental uploads our phones made sometimes when we forgot the album was still syncing. The image was low-lit and half-obscured, but unmistakable in its asterisk Macy. Liam's hand, recognizable by his heavy wristwatch and a small freckle near his thumb, resting casually on Sophie's waist. Too familiar. Too comfortable. The kind of touch that says, "I've done this before," rather than, "Oops, I leaned in too close." A second later, the photo vanished from the album. She had deleted it. I knew then it wasn't accidental. I sat there for a moment at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, letting the silence of our house fill the space. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly felt louder than it should. Our cat, Binks, was curled on the couch, completely oblivious to the sudden lurch of my stomach. I didn't call her. I didn't ask. I just stared at that empty photo icon for too long before finally getting up and changing into my suit for the gala. I told myself I was overthinking. Told myself I was being ridiculous. Still, I left 20 minutes early. The venue was beautiful. One of those old Denver hotels that makes you feel like you're stepping into a Wes Anderson film. Ornate chandeliers, a sweeping staircase, velvet banquettes, and bellhops in deep navy. The place had charm. The kind of charm we used to talk about appreciating together. The event was for a nonprofit our company supported STEM scholarships for underprivileged kids, I think. There was a silent auction and a jazz quartet playing near the lobby fountain. I tried to focus on the people to make small talk with other tech leads and HR folks, but my mind kept drifting to that bar tab, to that photo. When Sophie arrived, it wasn't from the front entrance like everyone else. She came through the east corridor, the staff hallway that connected the valet loop to the side entrance of the ballroom. I only noticed her because I happened to glance over while reaching for a mini crab cake from a passing tray. She wasn't alone. Liam walked beside her, slightly behind, the way people do when they're trying to look like they're not together but clearly are. They were both laughing at something. Her head tilted back, his hand grazing her lower back for just a second before he dropped it. The laugh was one I hadn't heard from her in months. She didn't see me at first. Or maybe she did and pretended she didn't. Hard to say. By the time she stepped into the main ballroom, her posture had changed. Straighter, colder. She shifted into her hostess mode, that version of Sophie who could glide through conversations like a breeze. Charming, witty, invulnerable. I started walking toward her, hoping to catch her before she got swallowed up by executives and camera flashes. But she turned on her heel, waved to someone across the room, and walked away. I stood in place, awkwardly adjusting my tie. I suddenly felt overdressed and invisible. A few minutes later, as I scrolled through my phone trying to look occupied, I noticed the shared photo album was gone. Not emptied, gone. Disconnected from her side. The album that had once been a quiet, lovely thread between us. Filled with road trip snaps *TS, late-night pizza selfies, and blurry kitchen dances, was no longer accessible. I checked twice. That was intentional. The evening carried on like some surreal play. Sophie floated between groups of people, clinking glasses, laughing at jokes, discussing marketing strategy like it was foreplay. Liam was never far from her, always lurking at the edge of her orbit like a shadow. At one point, they posed for a group photo with the CEO and a few department heads. Sophie stood in the center, Liam just behind her. His hand again rested lightly on her waist. I stood maybe 20 feet away, unnoticed. People kept trying to pull me into conversations. A senior systems analyst from the California office asked about our new infrastructure upgrade. A recruiter from the Boston branch wanted to pick my brain about automation pipelines. I nodded, smiled, said all the right words, but I was somewhere else. I caught Sophie's eye once across the room. She was holding a glass of champagne and smiling politely at some board member. When she saw me watching her, her face didn't change. Not immediately. Then, slowly, the corners of her lips lifted just a little higher. A smile for show. Not for me. It was a smile I didn't recognize. She walked over to me eventually, maybe an hour later, just as dessert was being served. Her dress shimmered under the lights. A sleek, deep green that I hadn't seen before. She rested her hand on my forearm lightly, too lightly, and said, "Let's try not to make tonight about us, okay? Just be present. Enjoy the event." Then she turned and drifted back into the crowd, back into the safety of performance and applause and curated conversations. And I stood there. I stood there knowing something had shifted in our world. Something subtle but irreversible. Like a key had turned in a lock I hadn't noticed before. Something had closed, and I hadn't even heard it click. I didn't want to become one of those people. The ones who scroll through their partner's social media looking for cracks in the facade. Who track receipts, second-guess text tones, analyze silence like it's evidence. But after the gala, something inside me turned. It didn't flip like a switch. It shifted, slowly, like a building settling on a fault line. The kind of shift that makes you feel off balance even when everything around you looks fine on the surface. The next morning, Sophie acted like nothing had happened. She hummed while making coffee, kissed me on the cheek with that same disconnected lightness, and asked what I wanted for brunch like we were still just two people in love on a normal Saturday. She had even started calling me babe again. Not Noah, not Han. Just babe. A word she hadn't used in months. It felt misplaced, like she was performing a version of herself she thought I'd recognize. I played along. I smiled, answered her questions, responded in kind. But the performance couldn't patch what I had already seen. And the worst part was, she didn't even seem concerned. That night, after she went to bed early claiming she had a long campaign call at 7 a.m., I opened her laptop. I wasn't proud of it, but pride felt irrelevant compared to the need for clarity. She'd changed her password. That had never happened before. And so the mosaic began to form, one tile at a time. Alone, each piece might have looked harmless. Together, they told a story I hadn't wanted to believe. First, it was her phone. Always face down. Always on silent. She used to leave it lying around, screen glowing with notifications about book club chats, Pinterest boards, or the occasional meme from her sister. But now, it was practically glued to her. She'd even started taking it with her when she went to the bathroom. I noticed because I noticed everything. Then there was the perfume. Not her usual vanilla and lavender mix. The one she'd worn for years. The one that still lingered on our sheets. This was sharper, heavier, muskier. I'd asked her once, trying to be playful. She'd said it was a free sample and shrugged it off. But the bottle later appeared on her nightstand. A full-size version. Not a sample. The shift in her routine was subtle, but it was there. Sophie used to shower in the mornings, always had. But lately it was night showers. Late night. After she came home from strategy sessions or team-building dinners. Once I asked if she wanted to join me in the morning instead like we used to. She smiled and said she felt more refreshed at night now. That night, her hair was damp, and the pillow smelled faintly like cologne. Not mine. I didn't confront her. Not yet. But I started logging things not like a madman, but methodically, quietly. I opened a private document on my laptop, password protected, called it details. Because that's what betrayal lives in, right? Not the grand declarations. The details. There were cafe receipts, 2 of them recurring. One place downtown with outdoor seating, one near a co-working loft in Baker. Neither close to our house or her office. Both appeared on our joint card under vague merchant codes like BVSVC 05423. They always showed up on nights when she said she was staying late for marketing alignment. I went by one of them the next Thursday, during one of those campaign meetings. I sat in my car across the street with a takeaway coffee I didn't drink and waited. Her car was already there. I waited an hour. When she left, she wasn't alone. Liam walked out beside her. No physical contact, no lingering hug, but the conversation looked easy and asterisk mate. Like they'd done it 100 times. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I drove home and added it to the document. Another piece in the mosaic. Then came the fitness app. We both used the same app for a while, part competition, part motivation. Sophie liked showing me her routes, the steep inclines, the split times. I used to cheer her on. But that stopped around the time she stopped inviting me to the gym. Her new routine didn't line up with any of the old gym branches we used to go to. One night, while she was in the shower, I opened her tablet. She hadn't thought to log out, and pulled up her recent activities. Her running routes didn't end near the lake trail anymore. They ended about 2 blocks from Liam's apartment complex. Not once. Repeatedly. I double-checked the gym registration app we shared. She'd switched to a new location downtown. It was across the street from Liam's building. I told myself maybe it was coincidence. Maybe the new gym had better classes. But my stomach didn't agree. Then there was the watch. She wore a fitness smartwatch that tracked heart rate and activity. Another leftover from our healthier days. I noticed spikes in her heart rate data, sharp ones, logged during the exact windows she was supposedly presenting slide decks or walking through ad projections. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came from a neighbor, Mrs. Klein, 3 doors down, texted me one night completely out of the blue. She said she thought I should know Sophie had been getting dropped off by taxis on random streets around the block. Nothing alarming, she wrote. Just unusual. She was old-fashioned, the kind of neighbor who noticed everything. I didn't know how to respond, so I just said thanks and added it to the list. Late-night cab drop-offs. Not our street. Never our house directly. Always 1 or 2 blocks away. I tested it. One Saturday night, Sophie said she was at a work dinner. I parked a few streets over and waited. Around 11:40, a yellow cab turned the corner and stopped half a block up. Sophie stepped out, wearing a blouse I hadn't seen before. She glanced over her shoulder before walking briskly toward our house. She never saw me. I waited until she was inside before circling around and parking. I didn't ask her about it. I kissed her cheek and told her I'd been working late. She said she was exhausted from meetings and disappeared upstairs. I sat on the couch alone, the glow of the muted TV flickering across a room that suddenly felt colder than usual. Then there was her language, the way she spoke. Everything had a filter now, curated, polished, PR-ready. And Liam's name had started showing up everywhere. Oh, Liam had the funniest pitch idea today. Liam said we might try influencer outreach in a totally new way. Liam thinks the Q4 numbers could rebound with some tweaks. It wasn't that she talked about him. It was how easily his name came up. How casually. Like he had seeped into the fabric of our home without ever stepping foot inside it. And while she told stories about work, our evenings shrank into silence. We used to cook together, laugh about podcasts, argue about which Netflix show to binge. But now it was just her on one end of the couch, scrolling through her phone, and me on the other, pretending I wasn't unraveling. I thought about saying something every night. Thought about asking the question that burned in the back of my throat. Are you cheating on me? But what would she say? Would she deny it with wide eyes and soft hands? Would she accuse me of being paranoid, of being jealous, of not trusting her anymore? Would I even believe her if she said no? And so I kept building the mosaic. Day by day, piece by piece. Because eventually the picture would be too clear to ignore. And I wanted to be ready when it was. They say suspicion is a slow poison. But they don't tell you what it feels like when suspicion turns into certainty. I didn't set out to catch Sophie. I kept telling myself I was just connecting dots. That if I waited long enough, the fog would clear and maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be what it looked like. Maybe there was some rational explanation for every late-night meeting, every deleted photo, every change in perfume and password. Maybe she was tired. Maybe we both were. But eventually, you stop telling yourself stories. Eventually, you want the truth. Not because you can handle it, but because not knowing is worse. It was a Saturday. Cold, gray, unremarkable. I remember that because it felt like any other weekend morning. Coffee, NPR humming low in the background, Sophie sitting at the dining table, tapping something into her phone while pretending to read through a proposal deck. I asked if she wanted to go out for brunch. She said she couldn't. Said she had a gym class at noon. Then back-to-back campaign syncs at Liam's place to prep for Monday's pitch. That guy works weekends now? I asked casually, keeping my eyes on the sink as I rinsed my mug. She didn't miss a beat. Yeah, he's trying to prove himself. New role pressure. I nodded. Makes sense. I watched her pack her gym bag. Water bottle, yoga mat, a small towel. Except the sneakers, her go-to cross trainers, were still drying near the door from earlier that week. Untouched. I checked the gym's app once she left. No scheduled class for her name. Nothing in the system. So I got in my car. I didn't tell myself I was going for a drive. I didn't make excuses. I knew exactly where I was going. Sophie always parked in the same lot when she was downtown for meetings. It was a half-covered structure near the boutique hotel district, close enough to their agency's creative loft to justify the lie. But I'd been watching long enough to know she wasn't using it to get to the office. By the time I got there, her car was already parked in its usual spot, level 2, far end. I pulled into the lot across the street and K** led the engine. My hands were damp against the steering wheel. I told myself to breathe. I didn't move for 10 minutes. When I did, it was slow, deliberate. I crossed the street and stood in front of the hotel. The sign read the Clarion House. One of those restored heritage properties with brushed gold door handles, ivy curling up the stone archways, and an aggressively discreet concierge who didn't even blink when I walked by like I belonged there. The lobby was warm, elegant. Velvet chairs, marble counters, a fireplace that didn't need to be lit but was anyway, for ambience. I stood near the gift shop, pretending to browse a rack of artisanal snacks, and positioned myself just enough to see the main elevator bank. I didn't have to wait long. Liam came in first. He wore dark jeans, a navy peacoat, and a scarf wrapped too neatly around his neck. His hair looked freshly styled. He scanned the lobby, adjusted his watch, and checked his phone. Then, right on cue, less than a minute later, Sophie walked in through the side entrance, the one near the alley where the valet usually parked overflow vehicles. She saw him and smiled. Not her work smile. Not her I'm on the clock smile. A real smile. The one I hadn't seen in months. They didn't say anything, not that I could hear. They just moved toward each other like magnets. Liam leaned in. She tilted her head back. And then, without hesitation, they kissed. It wasn't a peck. It was slow, familiar, confident. I stood frozen behind a display of rosemary crisps and honey sticks, pulse in my throat, watching my wife kiss someone else in broad daylight like the world had gone silent. After a moment, they pulled apart. She said something, he laughed, and they walked hand in hand toward the elevator. The concierge glanced at them, then looked away. I took out my phone. My hands shook as I opened the camera, zoomed in, and snapped 3 photos in quick succession. One of the kiss, one of them walking toward the elevator, and one as the doors closed behind them. That was it. That was the moment. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Not in that lobby. Not in those first few seconds. I felt nothing. Just this strange detachment. Like I had finally solved an equation I didn't want the answer to. I walked outside into the cold air, the clouds above me unmoving. I got back into my car, set the phone on the passenger seat, and stared at the hotel entrance for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there. The truth was out now, and it wasn't even dramatic. It didn't come in a burst of confession or a shouting match. It came in the form of elevator glass and a boutique hotel lobby and two people who had stopped trying to hide it. Later that evening, Sophie came home around 7:45 p.m. She walked through the door, dropped her gym bag by the stairs, and greeted me with a peck on the cheek. Her hair was pulled back, slightly damp. She wore leggings and a hoodie, like she just left a spin class. Perfect costume. "Long day," she said, collapsing onto the couch. I sat next to her. She didn't notice anything was off. That told me everything about where we were. "I picked up Thai," I said, as if it were just another night. "Your favorite." She smiled, not looking up from her phone. "You're the best." I nodded, studying her face. She didn't know I'd been at the Clarion house. She didn't know I'd seen everything. And in that moment, I realized something painful. She had stopped being afraid of getting caught. That was the difference. The guilt had faded. What remained was choreography. After she went to bed, I pulled out my laptop and uploaded the photos from my phone. I labeled them by time, by location, cross-referenced them with hotel check-in data I'd found online, and tucked them into the ever-growing digital folder I now called Separation Archive. I added a text log from that morning, her saying she had gym class, the timestamp of her car's arrival downtown, the photo evidence. I even found a Yelp review for the Clarion left by a user who mentioned seeing two lovebirds at the elevator making out like teenagers. I saved that too, just in case. I didn't know what I was going to do next. Not yet, but I knew what I had. Proof, not suspicions, not paranoia, not half-truths or assumptions. Just truth. Sat heavy on my chest, but weirdly it also brought clarity. A strange calmness settled in me that night. I wasn't spiraling anymore. I wasn't wondering. I knew. And once you know, everything else starts to fall into place. I slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling, the photos still fresh in my mind. Sophie never came down to check on me. She never even noticed. That was confirmation, too. After that Saturday, everything changed. But only for me. Sophie went on as if nothing had happened. She still came home humming, still made smoothies in the morning, still asked about my meetings with that too-polished curiosity she reserved for client calls. Her performance never faltered. But I stopped being part of the audience. I saw the script now, and I was done playing my role. I didn't confront her. I didn't explode or ask questions I already knew the answers to. Instead, I started laying the groundwork. Quietly, methodically, like designing a system you hoped would never crash but knew inevitably would. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. The first thing I did was transfer the bulk of my savings into a private account under my name only. Nothing dramatic, just enough to cover a few months of rent, legal fees, and anything unexpected. I'd never been secretive with money before, but this wasn't about secrecy. It was about safety. Emotional, financial, logistical. Then I booked an appointment with a lawyer. Her name was Tessa Gray, recommended by a colleague who had gone through a messy divorce the year prior. Tessa was sharp, soft-spoken, and asked all the right questions without flinching. When I showed her the file, the photos, receipts, timeline, fitness app logs, she didn't even blink. "Are you ready to act on this?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "But I will be." She nodded. "When you're ready, we'll move quickly." I liked her. She didn't push. She understood that betrayal doesn't just break you. It rewires you. You become strategic, cautious. You start thinking 5 moves ahead, not because you're playing a game, but because you're trying to protect what's left of yourself. I rented a small furnished apartment across town. Month-to-month lease. Modern, minimal, nothing fancy. It had a desk, a balcony, and just enough light to feel like I could breathe. I didn't move in right away. I just kept the key on my keyring where Sophie never looked. After that, I gathered documents. Birth certificates, insurance forms, my passport, our marriage license. I placed them in a safety deposit box at a bank Sophie had no ties to. I started forwarding sensitive mail, financial statements, legal notices, to a new P.O. box I set up under my initials. No traces. No alarms. All of this took about 10 days. In those 10 days, Sophie went to 3 campaign meetings, 2 client dinners, and 1 leadership training that ended with her stumbling into the house at midnight in a blazer that didn't match the blouse she left in. She never noticed I was watching her pattern. Every time she claimed to be in a meeting with her creative team, I would check Liam's corporate status through the internal dashboard I still had access to. He always went offline exactly 15 minutes before she did, and they always came back online within 3 minutes of each other, like synchronized swimmers surfacing for air. I started taking **TS, logging times, archiving chat threads where she'd casually mention grabbing lunch with the girls, while her location data, yes, I was tracking it now, showed her circling the same block as Liam's condo. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was record-keeping. She switched perfumes again. This one was sweeter, still unfamiliar. I found the bottle in her bag while she showered one evening. A receipt from a boutique popped out with it. I cross-referenced the date with our joint credit card. There it was, $184 at a designer shop known for luxury minimalist fashion. That same week, she came home wearing a new cream-colored coat with sharp lapels and tiny gold accents. I hadn't seen the charge before because it had been billed through a payment service buried in our statement under retail/miscellaneous. I took photos, saved them in a folder labeled wardrobe cross-reference. One night I tested her. I told her a team from Chicago was flying in and that I'd have to work late. Late enough that I'd miss dinner and maybe stay near the office overnight. She barely looked up from her phone. No worries, babe. I'll probably be out late anyway. Liam wants to go over the ad sequencing for the Q4 push. Perfect. I didn't go to work. I parked 2 blocks from the hotel district again. Waited. 8:37 p.m. Her car pulled up. She wasn't wearing the coat from earlier. She was in heels and a dress I'd never seen before. Short, tight, not a work dress. She walked into the Clarion house again. Same entrance. Same routine. I didn't follow her this time. I didn't need more photos. I just sat in my car and updated the spreadsheet I'd built. Date, time, location, attire, excuse used, evidence logged. Every entry sharpened the picture. Every lie gave me more control. I didn't eat dinner that night. Just drove to the new apartment and sat on the balcony with a beer, listening to the faint sounds of downtown Denver's nightlife echo below. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not my parents. Not my friends. Not even Jared, my best man and closest confidant. I couldn't stomach the pity or the anger. Not yet. Sophie started staying out later. Not every night. Just enough to normalize it. She stopped offering explanations unless I asked directly. Then she'd default to, "It's just campaign season, Noah. You know how it is." Except I didn't. Not like this. The int asterisk Macy between us disappeared completely. No touches. No late-night conversations. No eye contact that lingered. We'd become efficient co-inhabitants. 2 professionals sharing square footage. One morning, I watched her make eggs and toast like it was any other day. She wore one of my old sweatshirts, her hair in a messy bun, humming to a playlist we used to clean the house to together. She looked calm, unbothered, maybe even happy. That was the morning I knew for sure. She wasn't coming back. Not to me. Not to us. Whatever part of her that had once belonged here, it had migrated. Slowly, steadily, like erosion. And now she was standing in our kitchen like a stranger borrowing comfort from a life she'd already left behind. I started packing little things. Just a few at a time. My favorite mug. A set of towels. Clothes I didn't wear often. I boxed up old photo albums and moved them to the apartment. I didn't want to burn them. I just didn't want to see them anymore. I set up 2 email filters, one for legal correspondence, one for document storage. I cleared browser history, disabled sync on all shared devices, and installed encrypted backups of everything I had collected. I wasn't just preparing for separation. I was making sure there'd be no room for dispute. One night, Sophie came home unusually early. She walked in wearing that same cream-colored coat, cheeks flushed, laughing into her phone. When she saw me in the hallway, her laughter died instantly. She ended the call with a quick, "Yeah, I'll call you later," and slipped her phone into her purse. She kissed me on the cheek, her go-to tactic now when she didn't want to explain where she'd been. "Hey babe," she said. I grabbed Ty. "You hungry?" "No, I'm good." She hesitated. "You okay?" I smiled. "Of course. Just tired." And that was it. She nodded, peeled off her coat, and disappeared into the kitchen. She had no idea I had already filed the first draft of the separation paperwork. No idea that our marriage was no longer a shared structure, but a house I had already begged *N to quietly dismantle brick by brick. Blueprint in hand, exit path secured. And maybe that's the part no one tells you. Sometimes the end doesn't start with a fight. Sometimes it starts with silence. A week later, the company's founder, Martin Bramwell, turned 65. He was the type who never planned to retire but loved having reasons to remind everyone how irreplaceable he was. So he threw himself a birthday party at his country estate, an actual manor tucked into the foothills outside Boulder, surrounded by pines and stone fences, the kind of place that made you feel like you should have brought a wine sommelier just to navigate the drink table. The guest list was selective. Senior staff, plus ones, and a few investor types. Sophie had been talking about it for weeks. Not to me, though, to her colleagues in *T, knowing I could hear. Like the party itself, her excitement wasn't shared. It was performed. And then there was the dress. She bought it 3 days before the party. I found the receipt in our email inbox. $1.45, paid to a boutique in Cherry Creek North. I didn't say anything. I just searched the designer's name online. The dress came up immediately. It was red, deep, wine red, strapless, with an asymmetrical hem and a cutout near the waist that bordered on bold. A dress designed to be seen, remembered. She tried it on at home the night it arrived. Not for me, for her phone. I watched her in the mirror as she took photos from different angles, posing with practiced precision, her lips slightly parted. I stood in the doorway, unnoticed, or ignored. She finally caught my reflection. "What do you think?" I looked at her. I wanted to ask who the dress was really for, but instead, I just said, "It looks expensive." She smirked, unbothered. "It's a special occasion." Then she walked past me and shut the bedroom door. I heard the soft click of the lock a second later. Saturday came cold and clear, the kind of sharp autumn air that smelled like pine needles and distant fires. I drove separately. That was her idea. She said she'd be going early to help set up. Though since when did senior staff decorate? I arrived exactly 40 minutes after she did. The estate looked like something out of a movie. A long, curved gravel driveway led to a sprawling stone house with ivy-covered pillars and enormous wooden doors that stood open to the evening chill. Music drifted out, light jazz, a string quartet playing near the fireplace. Laughter echoed under twinkling outdoor lights. Everyone had a drink in hand, polished and effortless. I parked at the far end of the guest lot, near the trees, and walked toward the house without hurry. As I reached the stone steps, I paused near the French doors that opened into the main hall. And there she was, Sophie, dead center of the room. The dress hugged her body in all the ways she knew it would. Her hair was pinned up with soft curls framing her face. She stood near the fireplace, surrounded by a half-circle of executives and their spouses, holding a flute of champagne like it was part of her anatomy. Flashbulbs flickered. The photographer, hired by the company for these high-profile events, moved around her like she was the focal point of the night. She turned to pose for another *T, laughing at something Bramwell said, her eyes sparkling. She didn't see me right away. I stayed just outside the doorway, half-shadowed, watching. Took several seconds, 5, maybe 7, for her eyes to catch mine across the room. And when they did, her expression shifted. Not all at once, just enough. The smile didn't drop entirely, but it faltered. The glow dimmed. She wasn't expecting me to come through the side entrance. She probably assumed I'd arrive through the main gate, get caught up in valet check-in, maybe stop for a drink on the patio. But there I was, in the background of her evening, suddenly visible. I stepped inside, slow, deliberate. The hardwood floors beneath me creaked faintly. She held her posture for the camera a moment longer, then turned away as the next guest demanded Bramwell's attention. She moved toward the hors d'oeuvres table, pretending to refill her glass, her back now turned to me. And I just stood there, taking in the scene. For a brief moment, we occupied the same room but completely different realities. To her, this night was a stage. She was playing the role she'd rehearsed. A woman in control, charming, magnetic, professional, flawless. To me, this night was the dress rehearsal for goodbye. The photographer eventually made his way around to me. "You must be Noah," he said. "Sophie mentioned you." That surprised me. "Did she?" He nodded. "She said you worked in architecture, systems, or something. The guy behind the scenes." I forced a polite smile. "That's me. The guy behind the scenes. Exactly where she wanted me." I moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with people I barely knew. I shook hands with Liam. Yes, he was there, of course he was, and he greeted me with that same polished, vacant enthusiasm I used to think was just corporate polish. Now it felt like insulation. He didn't flinch, didn't stutter, didn't avoid eye contact. His mask was airtight. I stood next to him for all of 2 minutes, just long enough to let him know I wasn't hiding either. "Big night," I said, sipping my drink. He nodded. "Bramwell goes all out." "So I've heard." A beat of silence. "You and Sophie have been working closely lately," I said casually. He nodded again, unfazed. "She's brilliant. Couldn't have pulled off this quarter without her." Brilliant. I wanted to ask him if brilliance was what happened in hotel elevators on Saturday afternoons. But instead, I just raised my glass and said, "To partnerships." He clinked his against mine, not even blinking. I walked away. Back in the main room, Sophie was now seated near the fireplace with a group of directors, laughing at some story about a client call gone wrong. Her shoulders were relaxed, her body language open. She looked like she belonged, like she'd always belonged. I stood at the edge of the room again, just watching. And for the first time I saw her clearly, not as the woman I married, not as the person I'd built my life with, but as the person